Many folks that I've talked to here in Ohio are a bit surprised when I tell them that you can successfully grow peanuts here. Now, historically, peanuts have been thought of a bit more as a southern type crop, and there certainly are varieties that take too long to mature and would not do well in our climate. But you can pretty easily grow a 100 or 120 day variety here in Ohio in Zone 6. Now, I am by no means an expert. This is not a crop that I grow regularly. In fact, it's been years since the last time I grew them. But I found some really cool varieties from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange that I wanted to try out this year. So I just threw some in a raised bed where I had a little extra space. And today I wanted to share with you kind of my process of growing, some lessons that I learned, as well as the harvest. And while I don't have a huge yield, I also didn't have a ton planted, it does go to show that you can grow mature peanuts here. As I mentioned, I had 3 varieties from Southern Exposure Seed Exchange that I was trying out this year: Tennessee Red Valencia, Schrantz's Deep Black, and Texas Red and White. All 110 day varieties, which is relatively short season for peanuts. I started them indoors on April 11th to get a jump start on the growing season. The first step was to shell the peanuts. Southern Exposure sells their peanut seeds in the shells to preserve seed freshness. Next, I filled peat pots about 2/3 full with potting soil. I used Pro Mix and thoroughly moistened the soil. In general, I'm not a big fan of peat pots, but they did work really well for the peanuts. Then we placed the peanut seed on top and covered with about another 1/2 inch of soil. And spritz that with enough water to moisten. Everything was labeled, though it didn't matter because I lost track of everything after I transplanted it. And then, to speed germination, I placed a heat mat underneath my pots, covered them with a humidity dome, and placed the tray under grow lights. After about 4 days, the seeds germinated, and after they were a few inches tall, I started adding a low-dose natural fertilizer each time I watered. By mid-May, they were ready to transplant into the garden. The general rule of thumb is to wait a month after your last frost or until your soil has warmed to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. I transplanted on May 19th, which was about 2 weeks after my last frost. But I transplanted into raised beds where the soil warms much more quickly than my in-ground beds. Planting in a raised bed also allowed me to give the peanuts the kind of soil they prefer, which is loose, sandy, loamy soil versus the clay soil of my in-ground beds. I set my transplants approximately 18 inches apart and buried them at the same depth they had been growing in the peat pots. I also fed them with an all-natural 4-5-4 vegetable food when transplanting. Everything got watered in well, and then I mulched around the plants with grass clippings. One thing I discovered very shortly after transplanting is that chipmunks and rabbits love peanuts. The chipmunks kept digging up my plants, and the rabbits mowed the greens to the ground. So after almost losing all of my plants, I had to fence the entire bed in. One thing I didn't do was to hill the plants. You are supposed to mound dirt up around the plants when they are about 8 to 12 inches tall and have just begun flowering, so that the plants can set pegs, which is where the new peanuts will form, down into the soil. Pegs are a unique trait. According to the National Peanut Board, once the flowers self-pollinate, the peanut ovary begins to form, and that budding ovary is called a peg. The peg enlarges and grows down and away from the plant, forming a small stem that extends to the soil. The peanut embryo is in the tip of the peg, which forces its way into the soil and begins to form a new peanut. You also want to make sure the soil stays soft and doesn't crust over so that the pegs can easily push down into the soil. Even without hilling, I saw peg and peanut development, but perhaps I would have had higher yields had I hilled. Once flowering begins at about 40 days, peanuts prefer 1 inch of water per week, which mine didn't always get. You then want to taper off watering towards the end of the growing season. Another mistake I made was not paying attention to calcium levels in my soil. Peanuts need to have adequate calcium available in the soil near where the peanuts will be forming, or about the top 3 inches of soil. So if your soil is low in calcium, consider working some into the top layer of soil. Sources can include gypsum or lime. And application timing will depend on the source and form you are using, as some are best applied at planting time, and while others are best applied at early bloom. When the foliage starts to yellow, it is typically time to harvest. You may want to pull up a few pods and open them just to be sure the peanuts inside are filled out before pulling the whole crop. I loosened the plants with a pitchfork and pulled the peanuts off. Many sources suggest pulling up the whole plant, foliage, peanuts, and all, and hanging the plant to dry for about a month. I noticed that my peanuts start to mold when I try to do this, most likely due to humidity levels that are too high. So instead, I just rinse them off and pop the whole pods into the dehydrator to dry them out. After they've been dried, you can store them, roast them, or make them into whatever kind of peanutty goodness you want. So I'm gonna go inside and get these roasted. A tip if you've not grown peanuts before, despite the temptation, don't eat them raw. They kind of taste like raw lima beans. And I'm also not a big fan of boiled peanuts, so these will be salted and roasted. And I'd love to hear from you. If you are an expert peanut grower, particularly if you live in a bit more of a northern area, drop a line in the comments below and let me know your best tips and advice for growing big yields of peanuts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.